We turn now to our Crime Time segment, where we take a look at stories from around the nation and get some insight and perspective from our law enforcement experts who we bring in every night here. We've been doing it for quite some time, and I think it's an important part of this show. With me tonight, Assistant Chief Jailer, former Chief of the Major Crimes Section, Lieutenant Colonel Adam Lee III. Adam served as a police officer for 30 years. He oversaw homicide cases, robberies, special victims units, and a gun assault team. And he's the former Assistant Police Academy Director. Also still with us, retired Los Angeles Police Department Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey. Sergeant Dorsey started with the LAPD in 1980. She worked in patrol and specialized units, including gangs, and she's the author of Black and Blue, The Creation of a Social Advocate. Lieutenant Colonel, Sergeant, great to have you both back on the program. Let's begin first with a story involving protests. This one comes to us from WTMJ in Milwaukee. A video shows a woman spitting at a teen during a protest.
Day in and day out, my hope diminishes. The hope that my people and me, a young black man living in a white America, can one day be equal.
17-year-old Eric Lucas stood in front of his high school Monday morning, saying he is mentally and physically shaken after a woman spit on him during a peaceful protest he helped organize Saturday in Shorewood.
Our family harbors no hate, but does request that justice be prompt and appropriate.
In connection with the incident, a woman identified as local attorney Stephanie Rapkin was arrested Saturday night at her home on charges of battery and disorderly conduct. She was cited and released. The next night, Rapkin was arrested again and taken to the Milwaukee County Jail after Joe Friedman says she confronted him outside her home.
I went there with the intention of starting a community movement and saying that we do not stand for this.
Friedman says he didn't expect Rapkin to come outside, but once she did, he figured he should ask for her to explain her actions against Eric.
When somebody comes up to you like this,
What are you doing? She basically walked up to me and attempted to demonstrate what a protester did to her, even though it is very clear in the video that no protester ever laid her hands on her like she did to me. And she basically went up and slapped her hands down and pushed me, which I don't think is excusable by any means.
Shorewood police say Rapkin became physically resistant while being placed in handcuffs. Friedman says youth need to feel safe while peacefully protesting.
Don't let things like this burn out that fire. We are going strong, we have a voice, and we are making a difference, and this cannot impede that.
The Shorewood School District Superintendent is calling on the Milwaukee County District Attorney to add a hate crime enhancer to any potential charges filed against Rapkin. The DA's office says it will review the case on Tuesday.
All right, what does this woman's reaction to protesters and police, right? She's shoving police also, tell you? Lieutenant Colonel Adam Lee, what does this tell you about this woman, this attorney?
Maybe I'm reading too much into this, but I would say that she has some mental health issues, as well as possibly some substance abuse issues. Most police departments, large police departments anywhere around the country, now have a unit that specifically investigates hate crimes, and they're staffed by individuals that are highly trained to decipher whether or not those crimes qualify, and that would be any crime that would occur that's motivated by gender bias or racial bias, anything that would tend to lead you to believe that the crime was motivated by some other determining factor other than the crime itself. So I believe that I'm sure she's a racist, but there's some problems there with her mental health.
Sergeant, what do you think about her reaction, both to the protester, I guess the man who comes to her house, and then police?
Well, clearly she's out of control, and so I'm not going to give her a pass by saying that she's got some kind of mental illness. I think the real problem is she just hasn't spit on the right person yet. See, I had an arrestee spit on me, Vinnie, and I think the statute of limitations is up. I could probably talk about it now. If she spits on the right person, I promise you, she'll never do it again.
Let's get to our next story. And I know there's more to that story, but we'll leave it there, Sergeant. Next one comes from WTVR in Richmond, Virginia. an alleged KKK leader, right, arrested for driving into a protest.
It is a miracle. Nothing worse happened.
Eva Swanson counts herself among the dozens of Black Lives Matter protesters in Lakeside Sunday night.
We live in the north of the city, so we thought it was important to come out.
Swanson and several witnesses say this man, 36-year-old Harry Rogers, intentionally targeted their group walking on Lakeside Avenue with his truck.
I mean, he sped up. He revved his engine and sped up, and I thought for sure people were going to die. I mean, people were screaming.
He was going the opposite direction, made a U-turn, went through probably 10 vehicles to get to the protest.
Witnesses say Rogers hit a bicyclist, running over his foot before driving away. Police later arrested him, charging him with attempted malicious wounding, felony vandalism, and assault and battery.
There were individuals who were engaging in lawful conduct in a lawful protest.
Henrico Commonwealth's attorney Shannon Taylor said Rogers admitted he was a leader of the Ku Klux Klan and a propagandist for Confederate ideology.
The idea that we have anything that resembles what might be happening, what happened in Charlottesville in 2017, is something that we need to pay attention to.
It's very apparent that we're protesting everything that the KKK is.
Swanson says she feared someone may drive into the protest that day.
I want to be clear, though, like the fear I have is like a white person marching is nothing compared to the fear of violence that Black people face every single day.
All right. How can law enforcement keep protests safe? The reason I'm asking this question is there are protests taking place everywhere, big cities and small towns across the nation. And it's kind of like when I remember I was a reporter, I would show up somewhere, you turn that light on, it attracts people. Protests do the same thing. So, Sergeant, let's start with you. How do we keep these protests safe?
One of the ways is that you can create a path for the protesters that would put them in a safe place so that they have time to react should someone try to come at them with a vehicle, and also to provide for police escorts along the route that they are progressing, so that maybe just the presence of a uniformed officer will deter that kind of behavior. But aside from that, the protesters, the onus is on them to kind of keep their heads on a swivel, because you just never know where an opportunist may come from. It can come from in front of you, behind you, left or right. So you really have to pay attention.
Yeah, Lieutenant Colonel, many of these protests are taking place in streets. I mean, a lot of the footage that I've seen from around the country, in New York City a lot, we would see police with the protesters, and obviously that's one way to try to deter and keep things safe. What are your thoughts?
Well, under normal circumstances, when you have, let's say, a march, which is also a protest, there's some planning involved there, so you can get an opportunity to observe and evaluate the route that's going to be taking place, and also the problem here is that the police are the target here. The police are the target and the ire of the frustration of everyone involved. So that makes it very problematic for the police in this particular situation to provide protection for those individuals who really are out there because of their frustration with police operations.
All right, when we come back, more crime time and a lot of talk, a lot of focus on policing, but police have to do a job. And one of those jobs is to solve crimes and hopefully prevent crimes. But there is a spike in homicides taking place in one major city. We're going to talk about that when we come back.
It's always difficult. People think you get used to it. I never do. It hurts me each time like it's brand new, like I've never heard it before.
Talk about crime, talk about homicides in Indianapolis. Another one of the stories we're covering tonight in Crime Time. Still with us, Lieutenant Colonel Adam Lee III and Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey, both still with us here. Let's get to this story out of Indianapolis from WRTV, dealing with a rise in homicides.
There not the statistics anyone wants to see. Families across the city losing mothers, fathers, siblings, and children to violence.
It's awful. It's like kind of news that you just never want to hear, ever.
Elizabeth Bird is just one of many who got that call. Her 15-year-old brother, Peter Lambermont, was shot and killed back in January.
Literally, he just hooked up with the wrong kids and only knew him for 3 weeks, and that's all it took.
Since then, countless others have been impacted by violence.
It's always difficult. People think you get used to it. I never do. It hurts me each time like it's brand new, like I've never heard it before.
The city's director of community violence reduction says the pandemic has added additional challenges as they're not able to run many of the programs they typically do and work with people face to face.
We are definitely concerned about our summer months coming up.
But she says work is being done. Within the coming weeks, several youth and young adult summer programs will resume. A resource fair is also being planned. The goal, to connect people with job opportunities and mental health counselors. They're also working to form new partnerships with organizations and businesses for additional programming. She says the city can only do so much, though, and she's calling on the community to do their part as well.
Really want people to be patient with each other coming back out of COVID-19 restriction and to think before they act.
People take life for granted too much anymore. And they really don't realize it until something like what happened with Peter happens to them.
We're talking about like a 33% rise. And my question, are you surprised by the homicide increase? And this is happening during the COVID-19 shutdown. Lieutenant Colonel Adam Lee, the third, what do you think here? Are you surprised by these numbers? People have been locked inside for months.
Initially, I actually was surprised. I anticipated that we would see a reduction in violent crimes. There has been a reduction in violent crimes overall, I believe, with sex crimes. But when you think about it, you know, people who kill people usually don't play by the rules like us. So when you're asking people to shelter in place or to abide by social distancing restrictions, you're talking to people who think rationally about the odds of them possibly catching a deadly disease. And so that's not typically the people who are committing the crimes. And if you consider the other thing that was mentioned in the video, social services slashed, you know, people working from home, people unemployed, it's placed a burden on the society as a whole. So those people who would commit crimes, that gives them more incentive to commit those crimes based on having this major shutdown of society as we see it.
Yeah, Sergeant, another unintended consequence of trying to save lives is that you've got a homicide rate that went up in Indianapolis.
You know, a lot of people are having a hard time dealing with this sheltering in place and being unemployed, and we don't know the reasons behind these homicides. Certainly domestic violence incidents are up, and I would imagine that some of those may be part of the numbers, part of the statistics. And then when you factor in the fact that, you know, folks are out of work and, you know, there may be someone who is victimizing another person because they're going without. So there are a whole lot of reasons why this may be going on. And so, you know, this is why it's so important for police departments across the nation to maintain a level of trust and a rapport with the community, because as these crimes are being committed, you're going to be looking to solve them. And you want a community that can trust you and give you the information to help these families not get closure, because you never do, but at the very least get justice.
All right, I saved the best for last. The only way I can describe the next story is pretty amazing. This comes from KGTV in San Diego. An officer encounters a group spray painting a wall.
El Cajon Police Sergeant Mike Murphy was on patrol around 2 Wednesday morning when he got a radio call of 3 people tagging along Hart Drive.
Saw 3 males with the dark clothing and hit them with my spotlight and asked them to have a seat, which they all did.
The 3 men in their late 20s had spray paint under their nails with fresh paint on the sidewalk and the wall of a business. Sergeant Murphy took a closer look.
I saw that the message was not one of hate or anything. It was just peace and love and the peace symbol. They had spray painted BLM, all positive. Just had a discussion of, hey, you're not trying to say anything mean or hateful. Why did you choose a wall? And so I understood their frustrations of everything that's been going on. And we just talked about, hey, if this happened to your house or something, no matter what the message is, would you be upset about something like that? And they all agreed that, yeah, their avenue that they chose was the wrong one. So they came up with the idea of, well, what if we fix this? So I said, hey, I'd like to help you with that.
Sergeant Murphy, who says he had enough to make an arrest, instead decided to let them go and meet back there that same evening to help them clean up.
You would have gotten arrested. What's that going to help the message that they're trying to put out? And the vandalism still would have been on the wall.
At 7 in the evening, the three men showed up with paint, and together with Sergeant Murphy, they painted over the graffiti.
I mean, here's three guys that were true to their word. Sometimes we all need to be given that opportunity to come back from a mistake.
All right, is this part of the solution that we've all been looking for? Sergeant Dorsey, what do you think?
Absolutely. Policing with compassion, empathy, relatability, and sometimes you can teach lessons without being heavy-handed and get a far greater response. These young people are going to tell that story again and again and again. And so this is an example of the great, amazing work that police officers do day in and day out that we don't get to see and hear. So thank you for saving this for the last.
Lieutenant Colonel, it sounds like the solution. You know, everyone's talking about how do we do it? How do we make things better? I mean, this, to me, things like this is what are going to do it.
This is police reform. This is what it should look like. Ideally, this officer is the type of officer that people want to see on the street. I'm sure he knows how to switch gears and be the police, as we all know, if he has to. But he chose to edify these young men in a way that they could relate to. And like Sergeant Dorsey just said, they will remember that, they will carry that on, and they will tell this story because he saved them from a criminal record, at least on that particular day. And my hat goes off to him.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, the graffiti was cleaned up. I mean, it's a win-win-win all around. Great job tonight. Lieutenant Colonel Adam Lee III, Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey. I really appreciate your insight, and we will see you again soon.
See you next time.